Welcome to the Enterprise Thought Leadership Podcast, where we explore the latest in enterprise trends, tech, and strategy with the top leaders shaping the future.
Welcome to our podcast On Stage with Enterprise Thought Leaders. My name is Kanika and I'm the managing editor of IT Security Wire, which is our enterprise security publication. We have engaging conversations with global thought leaders and industry experts. They reach over 1.3 million business leaders worldwide. As AI adoption accelerates, organizations face growing challenges in securing sensitive data, managing encryption keys, and meeting evolving regulations like DORA. With quantum computing on the horizon, crypto agility and full data lifecycle protection are essential. Today, we have invited Tim Ayling. He's a VP Cybersecurity Solutions, EMEA,
at Thales.
to discuss how organizations can tackle the data security challenges brought about by AI, regulatory change, and the advent of quantum computing. Tim currently serves as a VP of Cybersecurity Solutions at EMEA at Thales. With 25 years of experience in the cybersecurity industry, he began his career in systems engineering. His leadership career was started when he established Entrust Incorporation in Australia in 2003, and he was made the Vice President Asia Pacific in 2006. Tim has held numerous leadership roles in large cybersecurity vendors, including Trend Micro, RSA Security, Kaspersky Labs, and now Imperva, as well as spending time in the cybersecurity practice of KPMG. He holds an MSc in Secure E-commerce and MBA. Welcome to this discussion, Tim. It's lovely to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Right. So my first question to you is, as AI adoption accelerates, organizations face growing challenges in securing sensitive data, as we just spoke about, managing encryption keys as well, and meeting evolving regulations like the DORA. How do CISOs handle the new situation? There's just too many things to balance, too many things on their plate. What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I always try to avoid, giving advice or telling CISOs what to do because their job is hard enough already, and they hear from a lot of vendors. But what I can say is, I talk to a lot of CISOs, a lot of our own customers, and AI is definitely the number one topic right now. And from two areas, actually, it's interesting. A lot of vendors like ourselves, we talk about AI as in hackers using AI to attack, and then we use AI to defend. But actually, equally as interesting, if not more interesting for me, is when an organization is trying to use AI themselves, there's a lot of security risks inherent in that, and it gets forgotten. So when you look at, the life cycle of AI internally, an organization needs to collect the data. It needs to train it. It needs to deploy the models, and then it needs to gain inference or gain results, basically. And there are attack vectors throughout, but the most prevalent are attacking the data collection. So actually trying to change the data. So a hacker trying to change the data to make it either inaccurate or sometimes actually to do bad things, such as kind of send out admin passwords and that kind of stuff. So to me, that's a really interesting part. So that's a part that actually technology is very much available right now. So there's one of the things that an organization needs to do is to discover the data they have, because quite often they don't know where the data is. And then they need to classify the data because they need to know which is important and which should be put in models and which shouldn't. And also, as you move data along the life cycle, what tends to happen is documents and PDFs are cut up into little chunks, put into a format that the model can understand, and then that's used to gain inference. And that is using tokenization. So actually, a lot of the threats, like data poisoning, for example, is at the data collection phase, which is really interesting. Now, as a CISO, when you're looking at kind of managing encryption keys, that's always been a challenge. I would argue that that's a bigger challenge these days because data is everywhere. It's a lot easier for people to kind of spin up new applications, and that tends to have a need for more encryption keys. So internally, we call that secret sprawl. And so that's become more of a challenge. So typically, I think most vendors would agree that a centralized place to manage anything, but in this case, keys, is kind of key for our customers anyway. That's what we see. And then finally, and I'm sure we'll talk more about compliance and regulations, because with AI, governments are playing a little bit of catch up on AI. China recently announced their AI regulations, which were very stringent indeed. But actually, when you boil down a lot of regulation, DORA is a big one right now. It's actually a lot of the stuff's are kind of very similar. So encryption, key management, data monitoring, they're all parts of that of regulation across the globe. So in that sense, I think it's a CISO can learn from previous work they've done when it comes to compliance. And so, yeah, spotting those overlaps are kind of really important.
That's right. So, but with quantum computing on the horizon, crypto agility and full data lifecycle protection are essential. Is the job made easier with newer tools and strategies? Do you think the job is made easier because we have newer tools now, or is it still, out there? What do you say about that?
I'm always very, very hesitant to tell a CISO that his job's being made easier, but but the reality is, I think a lot of the vendors are playing. They're putting a lot of development certainly into quantum. Funnily enough, I think the biggest challenge right now is artificial intelligence, but in a different way. So I was at one of our customer events last week in Germany, and it was mentioned that 2 years ago, quantum was kind of the number one thing that the board were talking about when it came to cyber. And then suddenly artificial intelligence came in, and it was kind of like, oh, go and look at that. And it was like the next shiny thing was artificial intelligence. So if anything, that took a little bit of focus away from quantum as a problem. But fundamentally, a lot of vendors, and obviously ourselves included, are kind of very much investing in crypto agility, having the ability to swap out new algorithms as they come. So it's definitely been top of mind for software vendors for a while. I just wonder whether the business at the board level have kind of moved on a little bit and gone on to artificial intelligence. So, but it will have to happen because the threat is very real. And if you're not really getting to the point where you're quantum ready soon, it may be too late. I look at it, a bit like, I don't know if you've seen the Indiana Jones movie when a guy comes out with a sword and he's swirling the sword around, and then Indiana Jones just shoots him. So people who are not quantum ready are the guy with the sword. And if you are quantum ready, you're Indiana Jones. I think it's better to be Indiana Jones.
People, and they say it's still a good 5 years away. Really think it's that much of a threat?
Well, it depends on which rumours you believe, because I mean, there were rumours that the Chinese government have already kind of developed something. I haven't heard much about that since, but they're not going to advertise that. The problem is that when it does happen, it's then too late. So, and also, there are instances of hackers stealing very, very critical data, knowing that in 5 years' time it will still be useful when they can decrypt it. And so, when I look at a journey along an organization's quantum journey, towards the end of that journey is encrypt everything with quantum algorithms. But actually, kind of halfway in the journey is actually encrypt your very sensitive and very critical data. And we should be reaching that point. You do need to understand what your critical data is, and you should be at a point where you're almost ready to start encrypting that using the latest and greatest in algorithms.
Right. So how does access to unified data, observability, regulatory compliance, and quantum readiness help security leaders stay on top of their game?
Well, I mean, they're three very different topics. Observability, I like calling it visibility. So I've always had a thing about visibility, because about 10 years ago, I was talking to a good friend of mine who is a CISO at an investment bank. And she told me she only cares about three things: budgets, regulation, and basically when something goes wrong, I need to tell my boss. So I always call that visibility. Because without visibility, you can't really do much more. How can you be compliant if there's data that you don't know about, and so on? So to me, visibility is absolutely essential. Observability in your words. So that's kind of absolutely necessary. Regulatory compliance was also one of her must-haves, and that's because that's always been a board issue. Now, I think regulatory compliance does get a bad name. A lot of people just say, well, it's a tick box exercise. We want to do other things, but we can't because we need to do regulation. But in our threat report last year, only 3% of organizations who didn't fail an audit had a breach. So it is a baseline. And most importantly, I think from cybersecurity, from the world of cybersecurity, is that it does go up to the board level. So the board do care. And in that case, that means they do release money to make sure that they, we're able to build a baseline of security within organizations. So that, in that sense, it's really important. And then, as you mentioned, quantum, it's there. I think most organizations are looking at it. If they're not, then that's a real problem. And as I mentioned earlier, the problem for me is whether something else shinier has come along and taken a little bit of focus away. But humans can do more than one thing at the same time. so hopefully it is a big it's something that most organizations are looking at.
So when we're talking about compliances, if they're going to be using increasing amount of AI deployments, do you think the AI compliance or AI rules or whatever is going to make their compliance a little more complex? It just occurred to me, so
Yeah.
would you like to say something about that?
Yeah, no, I'm sure it will. It's more things to be compliant about, and then, I mentioned earlier, there's so many different parts to AI. As I said, cybersecurity vendors typically focus on hackers using AI, and it's a little bit Terminator with attackers and defenders using AI and us humans on the side. But actually, I think what's more important is with these models is making sure that the data itself is not only accurate, I mentioned that, but also kind of ethical and clean, I guess, making sure that the data that an organization is putting into their language models is able to achieve what they want to achieve. Because if that data is wrong or even incomplete, then that's going to cause huge challenges for any organization, because if all your employees are kind of reliant on your version of ChatGPT, shall we say, and the data that it's spitting out is incorrect or even damaging, to the business, that's a massive challenge. So we might see AI causing a big increase in funding of cybersecurity projects. Hand on heart, I would love that to be the case. I guess the challenge, not just with AI, it's always been the case in cybersecurity, is us cybersecurity practitioners have always said we need to be included right at the beginning of any project. We need to build cybersecurity and cyber governance into projects. And AI is just another example where organizations are rushed out to create language models and use cases, and then security is an afterthought. So that's the real challenge for all of us in the industry.
So I'll just take a small digression here. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you would want to share with us during your visit to the Gartner Conference? Anything that you observed when you were, so to say, networking, or more colloquially
Yeah.
put, hobnobbing with your peers?
May I
Just-
say, may I say, after 3 days on my feet at Gartner, it's great to be sitting down and doing this. What I find interesting is there is a lot of talk about quantum and AI, especially, with no doubt. But actually, during the conference, there was the very large attack on the airports, and that was a third party breach. And actually, when I talk to CISOs in the industry, third party is probably still probably the biggest worry that they have, because they have no control over it. Now, that extends actually to both AI and quantum, because if you're using a third party that has a big AI model that's kind of essential to your business, that can damage your business. And it's the same with quantum. So during the quantum journey, one of the two first things that you do is actually make sure that your third party are kind of using the latest and greatest algorithms, and TLS is used, but the best version. Now, that's normally early in the journey, because it's not something that you have to do. I always kind of think that's a nice way of pushing it out a little bit. But actually, if this week and the what happened at the airports is it's a reminder to all of us that actually one of the biggest problems is third party, and that can incorporate AI and quantum, but it incorporates a lot of other things as well. And so I always think with cybersecurity, we're very focused on the latest big challenges, which is great in a way. But most of the time, it's an old technology that gets us. Something hasn't been patched properly, or social engineering happened, or something like that. So, I enjoy those conversations because it reminds me that actually AI and quantum are important, but there's so much other stuff that needs to be done. The basics need to happen first.
And the most basic of them all, human error, which just doesn't.
That's definitely true, and I have lots of examples that I probably shouldn't tell you.
Okay, any other examples you can share with us apart from the airport attack, which we heard widely about, of course?
So I mean, look, there are lots of breaches. What I would say is, people seem to think that AI is kind of a relatively new problem. I mean, the first deep fake attack was actually 6 years ago in 2019 for a UK energy company. And certainly with AI attacks, so when I started in cybersecurity, I hate to say, but 1997, viruses were the only thing that was a worry. And during the school holidays, there was a peak in viruses that, because the kids would be bored and they'd start writing viruses. With artificial intelligence, I think we're going to see the same thing, but with bots, because it's incredibly easy to write a bot. So as an example, not cyber related, I'm learning Spanish, and I wanted to write a bot that could talk to me in Spanish on WhatsApp, messages, and would correct me if I got it wrong. I wrote one. It literally took 30 seconds. You type in what you want it to do, and it will do the coding for you. So you can just imagine how much fun the school kids are going to have with this during the school holidays.
One of them gets loose, and then how much fun the CISOs are going to have too.
Exactly. It's going to be a repeat of the late 90s all over again.
So huge risks from both traditional as well as emerging threats is what you're going to say, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I talk tongue in cheek there about bots and kind of the volume I think will go up. But actually, what's more worrying is that bots are actually teaching themselves to evade techniques. Some of them are even rewriting the code within the bot. Polymorphic bots are doing that. So it's definitely going to be a challenge, and AI is a big reason for that.
So my last question is more about the solutions to all of these issues that we've just discussed, and how Thales can help their customers or the industry at large.
Yeah, I mean, so on the data security side, Thales have been in the industry for a long time. Traditionally, kind of very focused on encryption, tokenization, masking, and that's very important. Now, Gartner in the last 2 years have talked a lot about data security platforms, which I think was part of the reason that Thales acquired Imperva, because Imperva were more on the insider threat, looking at data monitoring and analytics, while obviously Thales were more on the encryption and the tokenization. Now, what we've seen in the last 2 years, is even a move from data security platforms to data security posture management, which is very much a visibility. So providing a risk score on your different databases or different files. And that was a visibility thing. Version 2 of data security posture management, which is coming, is far more analytical, far more contextual, can provide real recommendations to organizations of what they should do, and so on. And yeah, absolutely, Thales are one of the big players in that industry for sure, and have been for several years.
To share something about the solutions that you would recommend for somebody who's grappling with these issues.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It depends on the issue. So if you're worried about your own large language models and you're worried about the data collection, I guess there's a couple of elements to that. I mean, firstly, you want to make sure that your data isn't being altered and changed and so on. So, data activity monitoring, which is part of our portfolio, is very important in that. But also, if you want to avoid the external threat coming in and changing data, then encryption and our Cipher Trust platform is very strong there. And And then if you're actually worried about the bots that we were talking about, we're very strong in application security as well. So we have a platform for application security, which includes bot protection, advanced bot protection, but also protection against threats against APIs, which is becoming a significant problem in the industry right now as well. It's kind of the glue that holds everything together, and hackers have realized that. So, we have solutions around there as well.
So this brings me to the end of the questions I had for you. If you think there's something else you would like to discuss or something coming up, something expected to come up, please share.
Well, I mean, all I would say is to people is, we're here to help. We're not here just to sell products. We're here to provide advice as well. We have a lot of expertise all around data security and application security. As I say, I'm not here to lecture anybody on what they should do, but we are here to help as much as we can.
Thank you so much, Tim, for your time.
Thank you for joining us for the Enterprise Thought Leadership Podcast. Please do follow us on social media and subscribe for more ideas and insights. Until next time.